Hello, in this video we will review the Trade Manager TF Capital Management Expert, which was explained by the TradingFinder team. This expert consists of two main panels and a magic panel. In the main panel, we have 5 sections: Trade Pending Info, Partial Oxide Breakeven, and Trend Stop. In the Trade section, there are buttons related to the sell. We have buy, ish, and various methods for determining the load, and various methods for determining the stop, plus, and tip. In the pending section, there is also a section related to pending buy, pending sell, blocking the order and cancelling it, and a section related to determining the volume of trades, stop losses, and their types is in the info section. It displays the open trades and the symbol of that trade, the amount that the trade is in profit or loss, and the parts that are included in the trim, stop break, partial stop loss, close, 50% of the volume of that trade, and the complete close of that trade. The partial exit section, which includes 2 parts, risk to reward and points, is the percentage by which we close a part of the transaction. In the break-even and trailing stop sections, we have 2 different modes for determining the break-even and 8 different modes for determining the trailing stop. Here, in the magic panel, we can specify the types of volume determination and the types of orders that include sale buy, pending sell, pending buy, and this section is related to one-click trading, trailing stop, break-even, close, 50% of the last trade, and close, all trades. This section is related to the time to close the candle, and this section is related to the spread of the symbol on which the panel is run. This bot is related to displaying and not displaying the magic panel in the magic panel for placing orders. If I click on sell, here we can specify the amount of stablecoin by moving the line depending on the volume we choose. By selecting the volume, both the dollar amount of stablecoin and the TP amount are displayed. Now, with other methods, the same thing happens, and by selecting yes, the order is set and we click no. The order is completely deleted from the screen. For buy, it is the same as pending, which we can select. If our order is higher than the ask price, it will display the sell limit for pending sell. And if it is lower, it will display the sell stop for buy, and so on. If it's below the ask price, it shows a buy limit. And if it's above, it shows a buy stop. We can set the order or cancel it using yes and no. For example, if I click yes, this message will appear, indicating that by clicking on the yes option, we can set the order. And now this order comes and is set with the entry price specified here and the stable type we have set for it. And we can do this in one step using one-click trading. For example, here I am. Now I have this order. There is no need for that confirmation of the solo buy. If it is turned on by clicking this Borimesomai, then it will show the part that is subject to confirmation. Here, for each order, Waiki, the point value of that stop plus its percentage. It displays the price of the stablecoin and the amount that leads to the loss, with which we can delete that stablecoin. The same is true for TP. Its point value is displayed, the percentage of profit and its dollar amount, and the part that is the order itself determines its type, the lot entry price, and the profit that is now in loss or in profit. With this option, Wayami, we can close the order. Here we have the hidden stop loss or TP. If I click this, the stop loss and TP will be present. But later, when the price reaches there, it will act as a virtual one and close the order depending on whether the stop loss or TP on has been reached. If I deactivate this, click again, the stop loss will be displayed here. When I activate it here, the stop loss and take profit won't be sent to the server. They will only be removed when the price reaches the stop loss or take profit. Here, we can also activate the trailing stop and break even, and by enabling these options, this section will also be activated. And finally, we can easily move the panel to any side we want and need, and this magic panel section will be displayed and hidden with this button. This part is related to minimizing the panel, and the close button will close the entire panel. In the trading section, the yellow part is about determining the trading volume and its different methods. In the first case, we can manually determine the lot. And here, by clicking on the sell and buy options, we can apply the trade we want. For example, I just placed a lot of 1 and opened a sell trade here, which displays the type of trade at the price it opened, its volume, and the amount in profit or loss. This section is related to the close trade, hidden stop loss, and TP, trailing stop and break even. To determine the stop loss, we can use three modes: point, ask, and price. For the rest, we click on the first option, point. According to the amount we entered here as input, it will be the same amount away from the bid ask price according to the trade we want. For example, in this case, if the stable is lower than our entry point and I place a buy trade, then a buy trade is activated here and its stable is determined. For example, in the same case, if I place a sell trade, this message is returned to me because the stop loss is not set correctly and therefore the sell trade is not activated. In the first part, which is related to the point, by double-clicking on this line, we can determine its value and distance from the entry point. If it is higher than the ask price, it will determine the sell trade for us, and if it is lower than the ask price, it will determine the buy trade. And in the description of this box, I should also say that its distance from the price does not have a percentage that leads to a loss. It displays the dollar amount of the lot. In the second case, which is a percentage, it is intended to make a loss of 1% with one lot. Considering the equity of this account, which is about 32,060, it takes 1% and determines the distance. For example, if I change this lot and choose a value of 1.5, this stablecoin becomes narrower and is 218 points away from the last market price. Similarly, if I change here and, for example, narrow it by half, it becomes about 656 points. But in the end, the 1 point that we narrowed here is the golden amount that was considered for this stablecoin. And the last option is the price mode, which comes with a double click on this line. We can move it, pull, or set it manually. And in order to do this, we have to double click on the line so that the line is unselected, and we can give it a value, and I have chosen the value 29 here, and that's how I put the stables feature in this area. And now if I want to take a buy in the wallet trade, it returns this message to me because my stablecoin is higher than the ask price. And for the sell trade, it has now placed the sell trade and specified the same price as 29.29, and also specifies the amount of loss and its percentage. The tip section is the same as the stablecoin section, which has three modes: point, ask, and price. By double-clicking on this tip line, we can move it, and according to the lot taken here, it determines the profit amount. To determine the profit tick using the question mark, we can input the value here, in which case the distance from the ask point is 1.5%, or which is equal to 1.5% of the equity amount. Here, if we want to take a sell trade again, we encounter this message. Because the stop loss hasn't been set correctly, if I enable the stop loss, it should naturally be below the ask price, and we can't take a sell trade. That's why it's better to set the stop loss and take profit correctly to avoid facing that message. Now that we've set it correctly, we can use the percent section to determine a fixed value based on Persepolis. And for example, if I click on the trade sell here, as the characteristic determines the amount of stability and TP at the points that were determined, which shows us about 1% here, and here is the 73% that we had determined for it. The second method that can be used to determine the lot is to choose this percentage part, and up here we enter the maximum amount of our loss as an input, which is, for example, 1% of our maximum loss. Using the point amount, we can determine at what distance to set our stop loss. By adjusting the stop loss, the specified loss amount remains fixed and only the lot size changes. In this case, the percentage options are not active and only the point and price options are available, which we can adjust by double clicking on it or by manually entering it here after disabling that line. The same goes for the take profit section. The last option is to set the loss amount in dollars. For example, I enter 1,000 here, and by selecting the stop loss, the loss amount I chose will be displayed here, and by adjusting the line. Rise is active as we can double click on it and specify its position, or manually enter it here by turning off that line. It is the same in the TP section. The last item is to determine the amount of loss in dollars. For example, I enter the amount of 1,000 here, and by selecting stop plus, the amount of loss I had selected is displayed here, and by moving the line, the amount of my loss is also approximately constant and does not change. For TP, we use the lot that we determined the amount of stability here to determine the TP, which we can use, for example, the price here, in the second part of the pending section. We have two modes, buy order and sell order. If our entry point is higher than the ask price, it will specify the buy stop for us and the price intended for entry. If it is lower, the buy limit will be specified. We can also specify the stop loss and TP using the same methods I explained here. And in the sell order section, if it is above the price, it will take the sell limit for us as pending, and if it is lower, it will take the sell stop. Here, for example, since it is a sell trade, the stop loss must be above our entry point. To set this pending order, we can use the set order option by clicking on it. Based on the lot size we've determined and the entry point and stop loss we have, a sell stop order will be set. We can also use the cancel option, which will deactivate all these buttons related to pending orders, and we can disable the stop loss from here as well. In this section, we will examine the operation of the trailing stop in this panel. We can specify from the info section which trades this trailing stop is used for. To do this, first, we need to turn on this button in the main panel. At the same time, now when this button is turned on, the section where the trailing stop is in the magic panel will turn on. These two backends are related in such a way that if I turn off this backend, this part will also be disabled with every tick that is made. Here we have 8 different trailing stub modes, and the first one here is a default value of 100 points. So that if the trailing stub we have goes into profit by 100 points, the trailing stub settings will be executed on it. The first thing we need to do here is specify which of the trades we want the trailing stub method to be applied to. If I click this first option, for example, for the first trade, it will be turned on. Now this trailing stub is executed in such a way that when the trade is 100 points more in profit, the stub amount will be placed on the right at a distance of 2 points. For example, if I change this, at the number 50, as is characteristic here, the trend stub came higher, and MOS was placed at a distance of 50 points. In order for this to be repeated many times, we can use this step value, which means that when there is one, that is, once a trade goes to a profit of more than 100 points, the stub will come at a distance of 50 points. And if, for example, this amount is far away, this means that the distance taken here is 100 points more than the profit, but twice the 50 points, which makes the distance 100, and this amount is adjusted depending on how much the trade is in profit, so this stable distance will increase. Again, the model that can be applied to trending is the moving average trending. For example, if the trend is in the positive range of 100 points, you are in profit. What are the settings for the moving average? The time period is determined. The index for getting the value of the moving average is determined. If its value is 1, it means the last candle, and 2, it means the value of the candle before the last. This relates to the time frame settings applied for the moving average. Here we have the type of moving average, which includes 4 modes: simple, exponential, smooth, and linear weighted. In this section, we can specify all the methods related to the price type used for calculating the moving average. Now, for example, I'm displaying it from another chart, so our candlestick before the end is here, its value, and our stable coin will also be based on the settings we specified here. For example, if I change the stable coin value, and if I set the settings to exponential, for example, naturally this value changes. And depending on the value for the exponential settings, that moving average is also selected. And when it comes to the trend settings, it should be set accordingly. And you can even change the time frame. Naturally, the amount of mobbing will also change, which will change the amount of trailing stub. Here, the stable coin came and settled on our entry point. If you look closely here, my entry point is 248.54, and the stable coin also settled on the same amount. And here they return an error saying that they cannot set the stable coin for this trade with this ticket number D. So now it has happened that in the 30-minute time frame, because the Mobin Gabor value is less than the entry point, they actually cut the stablecoin risk and place it on the entry point. When it sets the stop loss at entry, it returns an alarm, and this trailing stop section gets off. Better to correct settings. Next, use ATR settings, default greater than 100 points profit, time frame 14. This is a multiplier for ATR. Amount adjusts time frame. Setting trailing stop, showed message. ATR amount exceeds initial 100. ATR is 405 points. Specified amount is higher. The trailer is in the 14th and now time period. This is a multiplier for the ATR to adjust the time frame. The ATR amount is greater than the initial value we set, which was 100. The ATR amount is 405 points, but we set the trailing stop to 100 points. That's why it's better for us to adjust the time frame or use a factor or the multiplier to set ATR settings. When this message appears, the trailing stop deactivates, so set this amount to half, a multiplier for the ATR value. The lamb is in profit by 100 points. That's why it's better for us to adjust the time frame or use a factor, PASI, or that same multiplier to set the ATR settings. When this message appears again, the trailing stop gets deactivated. So it's better to set this amount to, for example, half, which is a multiplier given to the ATR value. Now, for example, I've received this alarm again indicating that the ATR is 101 and we said it should go more than 100 points into profit. We can also adjust the point amount, so I can set this each out to 150. Now, if the trade goes more than 150 units into profit, then the stabilizer comes in. Using the indicator A and the coefficient that we give it, it comes here and sets it up and executes the trailing stub. To use the fractal indicator in the trailing stub section, the settings are as follows. But the first thing that is mentioned is the point that the trade will reach after that amount. The trailing stub will be executed. The scan bar is the fractal number that is used for settings. In this case, the first fractal takes into account this pivot point, and the second one takes into account this pivot point. Here, you can also specify the time frame for the fractal indicator. So in this info section, I turn on the buy trend stub button, so it returns an error that the trend stub is in. Because of this, the second and third fractals are less than the entry point. So it places the stable and the comet at the entry point, and it does a risk reversal and returns this error. In this case, this backend is turned off, so it is better to reset the fractal settings, and for example, let's use the last one. The last one, because its value is higher than our entry point for the buy trade, can be more easily trailed. By the dot and by highlighting this button, the stable came here and is now a trailing stub step. The next model that we can use to create a stable trend is to use the parabolic SAR indicator. This part is related to the settings, which are set to the 200th step in advance, and the maximum is also set to the 200th step. The index is related to the fact that when its value is 2, it uses the penultimate candle. Now here, the penultimate candle, well, its value here is in the range of 255.42, and so the stable trend is also. And now by changing these settings, the value of the parabolic SAR indicator changes. And naturally, the value of the stables changes with it. According to the low bar, the most stable is as follows. It uses the candles that are specified in this time frame to set the stables so that the low of that candle is set for the Saudi trails, and the stables are set, and the high of the candle is set for the bearish trails. And the stop loss is determined by the point section, which means that the trade is currently defined as a default of 100 points. This means that if it goes more than 100 points into profit, it will activate the trailing stop. If the index is set to 1, it refers to the last candle, and if it's set to 2, it refers to the candle before the last one. And we consider the time frame that comes to use that candle here. If I, for example, light it here with the trend that is related to this trend and it comes on our candle before the end of my stable, it sets on the low of that candle. And as the market moves and creates new candles, this happens again. For example, if I come here and use the fourth candle to set the stable, because the low of this candle is lower than the breakpoint, it returns a message saying that it could not set the stable correctly at that point because the low is lower than the breakpoint. That's why the stable is set on the point. It has an input and returns this message, and this bottom also turns off, using the Bollinger Band section in the trailing stop settings. First, we set the section related to the indicator settings, where we set the time intervals, deviation, and shift that are always in the Bollinger Meter indicator. And using the Bollinger indicator, which is here specified for buy trades, it sets the stable on the lower Bollinger line, and for sell trades it sets the stable on the upper line. If the lower line of the indicator is below the entry point, it retests the trade and sets the stable on the entry point. For example, if I set the time frame here to 15, Because this lower line of the indicator is below the breakpoint, the stablecoin goes to the breakpoint and returns a message that it could not be set correctly. It cancels the stablecoin and the internals related to this trade. And the last thing about trailing stop settings is related to the zigzag indicator. It takes the zigzag indicator as input, and here you can set its value and its time frame. For example, the last pivot here was formed in a 5-minute time frame, so we set this here too. And by turning on this button, it sets the stable here. And if the values of this pivot are in the time frame, for example, let's say we set the minute peg that is lower than the entry point, then it sets the stable on the entry point. For example, here I set this on the minute peg, then it returns this message again, and I turn off this bot. In the partial oxide section, using risk to reward or points, we can specify a range that, if the trade goes into profit and reaches that point, will result in a percentage of the desired volume being removed from the trade. For example, here we can use risk to reward to lighten them by 1, 2, or 3, or we can use the amount of points we give to each trade to remove the percentage we want from the trade. Here is the important point. If we select risk to rebate, for example, if I select risk to rebate 1, the point section will no longer be active, and only by using risk to rebate, the percentage we specified will be removed from the trade. Or if this risk to rebate is turned off, it will use the point. So to use the point, we have to manually give it a value like this. The risk to reward section must be turned off, and here we can also specify the percentage. For example, in this trade, I can use risk to reward or points to get the percentage I want out of the transaction volume. For example, here we have a risk to reward of 20%, a risk to reward of 20%, and a risk to reward of 350%. If this risk to reward option is checked, it will use the risk to reward. However, if this option is unchecked, it will use the point system. And for each trade, you can enable this section to specify that a partial exit should occur. Here, I turn on the risk to reward of 1, and I've set the point limit to 2,000 points, so that 30% and 50% are not applied, since this trade is about 850 points in profit. That's why it won't be applied. And we set the partial exit here for this trade. My volume was 1 lot, and it reduced 20% of it. It returned this message showing the first partial exit has been executed, and it shows the order ticket and the symbol where this happened. Now, if I select the risk to reward of 2, it reduces 30% of the initial volume, which was 1 lot. It can be identified and clarified from the Mujazun. As you can see, my volume was 1 lot and it reduced 20% of it. It returned this message indicating that the first partial exit has been executed, showing the order ticket and the symbol where this happened. Now, for example, if I select the risk to reward of 2, it will reduce 30% of the initial volume, which was 1 lot again. And it gave this message that from the lot size, the percentage becomes 0.3, and it reduced that amount. Now, here we can set it using points. For example, if I set it to 500 points, it will reduce 50% of the remaining initial volume we had. It reduced that amount, and the third partial exit was completed successfully. In the end, it displays this message indicating that all 3 partial exits have been completed.